distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 2021 International Forum on Transboundary Air Pollution, commemorating the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. My name is Kim Dae, and I'll be your MC for today's forum. The United Nations has designated September 7th as the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies upon Korea's proposal in 2019. And this year marks the second anniversary. The International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies is a global call for action toward a single unifying objective, clean air for all. Today, experts from home and abroad are joining us here at the physical venue, and also we have speakers and panelists participating online. This forum is being live streamed through the official YouTube channel of 2021 International Forum on Transboundary Air Pollution, commemorating the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. Once again, thank you for joining us today, despite of all the difficulties caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, let us begin the forum with the welcome remarks delivered by His Excellency Chung Eui-yong, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to today's International Forum on Transboundary Air Pollution, which celebrates the second anniversary of the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. My special thanks go to all participants who are joining us in person and virtually from different locations around the globe. The International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies was designated by the United Nations in 2019 upon the Republic of Korea's proposal. With its observance promoted by UNEP, the global campaign that followed the first celebration in 2020 has triggered an innovative global partnership by sharing the need to enhance international cooperation under the theme of clean air for all. In spite of our efforts, however, we are still a long way off from enjoying quality air that can protect human and planetary health. In particular, the link between climate change and air pollution should not be overlooked. A recent IPCC report alarmingly highlighted that climate change is widespread, rapid, and intensifying. In some marginalized communities, still reliant on solid fuels such as wood and charcoal, nearly 5 million people suffer premature deaths from indoor air pollution. Hence, the threat to clean air is a threat to global public health. In this vein, we support the United Nations initiative to designate Healthy Air, Healthy Planet as the second theme of the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies in 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, the ROK government has been actively taking part in the global efforts to attain clean air. In 2020, we announced the Green New Deal policy to push our society towards a net zero carbon economy. To accelerate such efforts, Green New Deal 2.0 was announced in July this year, and last Tuesday, the Carbon Neutrality Act was passed in the National Assembly. Last May, we hosted the second Partnering for Green Growth Summit and adopted the Seoul Declaration to strengthen the international community's commitment to supporting green recovery. The International Forum on Transboundary Air Pollution is also part of our endeavor to reverse the harms that threaten global public health and to reinforce our collective efforts to fight for clean air. In doing so, it is essential that the perspective of science and technology is incorporated into relevant policies. Last year, Korea launched a geostationary satellite equipped with an environmental monitoring system. This system produces scientific evidence to monitor atmospheric pollution for clean air and blue skies. Transboundary cooperation, especially regional coordination in the Northeast Asia region, is also critical. We plan to share the environmental data collected by the geostationary satellite to further advance regional cooperation. Distinguished participants and ladies and gentlemen, I'm confident that our dialogue and the global campaign that kicks off today will shed light on the next steps we need to take to ensure clean air and healthy air. This forum will also enable us to explore ways to preserve a pristine atmosphere and environmental health for a better tomorrow. The right to enjoy clean air should indeed be granted to everyone on this planet. The actions we take today will contribute to a better future for humanity and its access to clean and healthy air. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your welcome remarks. Now we will continue with congratulatory remarks. First, let us listen to the congratulatory remarks delivered by Inger Anderson, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director of the UN Environment Program. Please give a big hand.
Thank you for inviting me to speak at this important event. Allow me first to acknowledge the leadership of the Republic of Korea in the adoption of the United Nations resolution that created this day. Take a breath of fresh air, they say. Well, that's easier said than done. More than 90% of us breathe dirty air, and atmospheric pollutants cause up to half of all of global warming. This year's International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies is a reminder that healthy air and a healthy planet go hand in hand. We all breathe the same air, and we all have a role to play in protecting it. So the work begins now, with us. Investing in green to kickstart economic recovery can steer us away from burning fossil fuels that pollute the air. With COP26 on climate change within sight, commitments by all countries to decarbonize can help us reach net zero emissions by 2050 and guarantee better air quality. UNEP's global assessment of air quality legislation in more than 190 countries revealed that we must get far better at adopting ambient air quality standards and national air quality monitoring mechanisms to effectively implement air quality laws. Deploying nature in greening our cities and investing in electric mobility can help us to breathe easy in cities. The good news is that every step we take to improve air quality is one more step towards addressing the triple planetary crisis of climate change, of biodiversity loss, and of pollution. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has sounded the alarm. Climate change is here, now, and it is getting worse. As the IPCC notes, targeted reduction of many air pollutants can improve air quality while reducing global warming. So together, let's work to create clean air for generations to come.
Thank you very much for giving us your words. And next, Yoon Soon-jin, co-chairperson of 2050 Carbon Neutrality Commission, will give us a congratulatory speech. Please give her a big hand.
Ladies and gentlemen, glad to meet you. Marking the international, my name is Yoon Soon-jin, co-chairperson of 2050 Carbon Neutrality Commission of Korea. Marking the International Day of Clean Air, the meeting is being held to commemorate this day, and it's my great pleasure to see the successful opening of the forum. This day was first suggested by Korea at 2019 UN Climate Action Summit, and this proposal was accepted at the 74th UN General Assembly. This day was born to raise awareness of international community on air pollution and to make our air and skies cleaner, urging people around the world to act on it. In the past, clean air and blue skies were taken for granted, like public goods. But due to climate change and fine dust traveling across the countries, we have only a small number of days in a year when we can see clean sky. Dear speakers, panelists, participants joining on and offline, Our atmospheres and skies are all interconnected and knows no boundary. Thus, to make our airs and skies cleaner, transnational efforts are needed to collect our wisdom and put our plans into actions. Instead of one-off or short-term commitment, collective efforts transcending nation interest ideologies are required to achieve global-wide sustainable development and hand down clean and unpolluted planet to our next generation. This is the only option we have. Air pollution issues are also closely related with greenhouse gas inducing climate change. Both are caused by the combustion of fossil fuels, and climate change makes our atmosphere more stagnant, aggravating air pollution even further. Fortunately, countries around the world agreed that greenhouse gas-induced climate change is a serious and urgent issue and decided to curb the emission as much as they can while observing and removing the rest unavoidable at the current stage in order to achieve so-called net zero or carbon neutrality. Korea also announced its ambitious plan of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. Korea has embarked on this journey towards 2050 carbon neutrality, and until it reaches its destination, governments, companies, civil organizations need to join forces to achieve carbon neutrality first on the Korean peninsula and then in the world. Today's forum is joined by experts from countries in Northeast Asia highly relevant to air pollution issue in this region, including China and Japan, and also by pioneers in international organizations such as UN, as well as other prominent figures are with us at this forum. The forum invited experts from multiple regions, and taking this opportunity, I hope that we can produce creative and constructive solutions for air pollution and climate change. Your innovative ideas and fully committed activities will enable us to achieve our climate goals of making our airs and skies cleaner. Once again, I congratulate on the successful opening of the forum, and I hope that it can be a chance to build a stronger alliance among the like-minded people. Thank you so much for your kind listening.
Thank you, Co-Chairperson, for sending us your kind words. And next, please allow me to invite Ambassador for Environment and Professor Emeritus of the Seoul National University, Mr. Kim Jong-wook, on the stage for his congratulatory speech. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Nice to see you all. Thank you for wonderful remarks. It is not easy to have an overlapping speeches, but I will start. I sincerely congratulate the opening of the International Forum of the Second International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. I believe that you have a hard time during this COVID-19 pandemic. There are so many deaths happening across the world, and 2,300 people died in Korea. However, we have a bigger issue. It was like a 4.5 million across the world for 2 years. However, according to the statistic, 7 million, more than 7 million people are dying because of the air pollution. But the biggest death count is happening in the Northeast Asia, like India and China. But in Korea, the biggest killer, the cause is the fine dust. But we have the lung cancer and lung disease, which is related to the fine dust. And we have casualties of 35,000 due to this, the lung cancer and the lung-related disease. And we also have cardiovascular disease, which is also related to fine dust. This is a very important issue, but we are ignoring the significance of these environmental issues. nowadays we heard that the 90% of the total populations are breathing the dirty air, and that this issue will become bigger and bigger. So in order to prevent this situation, we have to keep the rising temperature under the 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's our goal, and this is the most daunting task for the human beings in the world. The COVID-19 pandemic caused the great death in world, and we have also the economic impact. We lost 10% of the GDP economic growth, and in Korea it was just 3%. Not only GDP loss, and the other country also had an increasing debt. Almost 40% they see the increasing debt, but we have a great minister, so our debt increasing rate in Korea is not that big. But the debt is a great burden for the country, because if we cannot pay back, the country can go upside down. So if this continues, we will have a great economic impact across the world. However, the climate change and the climate issue will give the bigger impact than this COVID-19 pandemic. So climate change and the air pollution is coming from the same causes. So we can solve this problem at the same time using the carbon neutrality. We have to save the energy. We have to develop the renewable energy to solve this problem. With the technology and our spirit, we can solve the issues. And we have a great death toll in the Northeast Asia, which imports energy most in the world. The world top 5 energy importing countries are the China, India, and Korea, and Asian countries. So those 3 countries in Asia spend huge money to import the energy. Almost 200 trillion won were spent to import the energy. So through the carbon neutrality, we can save this money, and we can save the energy, and we can develop the renewable energy. And with that, we can solve the problem of the air pollution and the climate change. We talked about the P4G summit, Seoul summit. And in that summit, these kind of things were emphasized. So we have so many experts from the Northeast Asia today. I hope that we can have a very constructive idea through the in-depth discussion, and our discussion will contribute to the great development of our regions. We have Ambassador Kim Hyung-won here. She's coming later, because she did a great work to organize these event. And Dr. Liz Freiman, I'd like to thank you for your cooperation and the hard work. Thank you all for being here today again.
감사합니다. Thank you, Ambassador, for giving us your words of encouragement, and at the same time, your words raised our awareness on this matter. Thank you. Now we will begin the first session of today's forum. The first session is held under the theme of interactions between climate change and air pollution. First of all, Frank Riesberman, Director General of Global Green Growth Institute, will chair this session. And also we have a very distinguished panel of experts. Professor Xu Xiao Wang of School of Environment from Tsinghua University will give us a presentation. Professor Wang is joining us online in Beijing, China. And here on the venue, we have Managing Director Kim Ju-jin of Solutions for Our Climate, Co-President Kim Ji-yoon of Green Environment Youth Korea. Now let us invite our moderator and panelists to the stage. Please welcome them with a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to moderate this first session together with the two panelists who were just introduced. And then online, we also have an eminent speaker, Professor Wang Shuxiao, who is a professor, there you are, at the Department of Environment of Tsinghua University. And she has worked on this subject of the link between climate and air pollution for many years. I have to say, the link between climate and air pollution might not be as obvious to everybody in Korea, where air pollution, blue skies, is a very obvious problem. Climate change, not as much. And I would like to add, in fact, there are many other deep sustainability crisis components that are also not so visible. We are indeed living through a deep sustainability crisis, and I can recommend to all of you to watch a new Netflix documentary on so-called broken boundaries that explains all these links in a wonderful way for non-experts. But today I think we are honored to have with us Professor Wang, who will give us an excellent presentation on the links between air pollution and climate change. Professor Wang, can we invite you to give your presentation?
Sure. I'm sharing my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Dear Excellencies, distinguished participants, Mr. Frank Risberman, thank you very much for inviting me to attend this forum. It's my great pleasure to present the case study of China on tackling climate change and air pollution together. So as I already mentioned by Ms. Inger Anderson and Mr. Yoon Sun-jin, Mr. Chong Eun-rung, that air pollution and climate change are two top health threats worldwide. More than 80% of the people living in urban areas are exposed to air quality levels that extend the WHO limits, especially for those living in like China, East Asia. So this makes air pollution one of the highest causes of deaths. In 2019, air pollution contributed to more than 6.7 million deaths worldwide. Meanwhile, human activities are changing the global climate. You can see that the Earth's global surface temperature warmed over 1 degree between 1850 and the last decade. So the climate change may cause like 250,000 additional deaths per year between 2030 and 2050. On one hand, air pollution and climate change have a common origin. So that is our increasing use of fossil fuel. Fossil fuel combustion emits both air pollutants such as sulfur dioxide, NOx, particulate matters, as well as carbon dioxide. So many air pollutants such as ozone and particulate matter and even CO also directly or indirectly affect the radiative balance of the atmosphere and contribute to climate change. On the other hand, air pollution and climate change are intricately linked. So climate change also influences air quality by altering the meteorological conditions, including rising the temperature, changing the wind and the relative humidity, as well as changes in the precursor emissions from natural sources, such as from the plants that are influenced by meteorology. So China is challenged with the simultaneous goals of improving air quality and mitigating climate change. In 2020, China announced the goal of building a beautiful China by 2035. And at the same time, we have the target to achieving carbon peak by 2030 and the carbon neutral by 2060. However, in 2018, the ambient PM 2.5 concentrations in Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei region and the 74 K cities far exceed the national ambient air quality standard of China, that is 35 microgram per cubic meter for PM 2.5, and also the WHO guidance, which is 10 microgram per cubic meter at annual level. So at the same time, we can see that China is emitting about 10 billion tons of carbon dioxide per year, which poses a much bigger challenge of carbon neutrality for China compared with other countries. So here we couple an integrated assess model and a chemistry and transport model to evaluate the air quality in China through 2035 under the national determined contribution scenario, which is in line with the Paris pledgement, and also an enhanced low carbon energy scenario. So our results indicate that you see in the middle picture that some Chinese cities, especially in Beijing, Hebei, Tianjin area, cannot meet the PM 2.5 target under the NDC scenario by 2035. The PM 2.5 concentrations will be above 35 microgram per cubic meter. So even we put up with the strict endo pipe controls. So achieving the air quality target would require further reduction in fossil fuel use and drive additional 22% of the carbon reduction relative to the NDC scenario. So our results also show that about 158,000 premature deaths can be avoided annually owing to the decrease of PM 2.5 concentrations from low carbon policies in like 2035. So these incremental health benefits from the improved air quality, like PM 2.5 improvement and ozone improvement, exceeds 8 times of the additional cost of carbon mitigation. So this is major attributed to the cost-effective reductions in household PM 2.5 exposure. And before 2035, we see that the air quality quest is pushing the carbon reductions. But after 2030, as the emission reduction potential of end-of-pipe control measures will be exhausted, deep carbon, low carbon transition measures under the carbon neutral target will become a key driver of continuous air quality improvement in China. So here we investigate 2 different scenarios. The reference scenario with fossil fuel development, so-called SSP 585, and the sustainable and the green pathway, which limits the global temperatures increase to 1.5 degree, so-called SSP 126. So we have found that compared with the reference scenario, the blue bars, and the China's sulfur dioxide, NOx, SO2, and the VOC emissions in the 1.5 degree pathways by 2050 would decrease by 78, 75, 73, and 60% respectively. So that's quite a large reduction of emissions. And as above mentioned, the anthropogenic emissions and the methodology will change under different scenarios. So however, how significant are the clean air co-benefits compared with the direct climate-related impacts is unclear. So here we evaluate the co-benefits of 1.5 degree pathways for air quality in China. We have found that the emission reductions under the 1.5 degree pathways in 2050 will lead to a decrease of PM2.5 concentration by 11.4 microgram per cubic meter, and the maximum 8-hour average ozone by 5.5 ppb. So the air quality improvement, here the blue bar, owing to the emission reduction, far overwhelms the influence of the future meteorology changes. That's the orange bar. It's hardly to see. And the reduced air pollution emissions under these 1.5 degree pathways, we also avoid like 1,589,000 and 526,000 premature deaths. That's respectively for PM2.5 and ozone. So that's quite a big number compared to the change, owing to the change like heat wave related deaths. That's only 7,000 per year. And in addition, the future climate change caused the increase of ozone and increase the ozone related deaths. So we can see that substantial anthropogenic emission reduction co-benefits of 1.5 degree pathways in improving air quality. And such results indicate that sustainable development should be continuously promoted, especially in developing countries with serious air pollution problems. So here are the take-home messages. Air pollution and the climate change are intricately interlinked. So we need policies to tackle air pollution and climate together, especially for the developing countries. In the short term, we can see that the air quality attainment target in China would lead to more reduction in carbon emissions than its naturally determined contribution. But in the longer term, China's carbon neutrality goals will play a critical role in reducing emissions of air pollutants and protecting human health. And the case of China illustrates the synergy of air pollution control and the climate mitigation will bring significant co-benefits. So therefore, more efforts are needed to identify and promote policies that provide win-win solutions for air quality and for climate. So finally, let's work hard together towards a clean air and a healthy planet for our future generations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Wang. That was a great speech, and thank you for showing convincingly that indeed climate change and air pollution are intricately linked, and that measures to reduce one problem will also help the other. And it was good to see that if indeed China wants blue skies, it would reduce its CO2 even more than its current NDC, which I think is a very interesting measure, and that even from just a health perspective, such measures would be cost effective, which is also, by the way, what studies of the Clean Air Act in the US showed. You showed even by a factor of 8, which I think are very important lessons for many countries. Now, you indicated that there are some good win-win policies. Could you give some examples of what would be good win-win policies that have worked in China?
Yes, thank you. Chinese government released the National Air Pollution Prevention and Control Plan in 2013. So after that, great efforts have been made to reduce the emissions of air pollutants. And many of those measures also help to reduce the carbon emissions. I can give a few examples. First, China works hard to reduce the coal use in industry and in households. And in 2013, there were 620,000 coal-fired industrial boilers. So that's a large number. Now there are only less than 100,000 left. So many coal-fired boilers were substituted by electricity or by natural gas. And also at the same time, the coal stoves in like more than 25 million households have been replaced by electricity and natural gas. So the, in addition to this reducing the coal use, we have reducing the proportion of coal burning in the total energy consumption in China. Before 2015, that coal accounts for 65% of the total energy use. Now it's only about 57%. So definitely it will be further reduced. And in addition to that, more than 200 million tons of backward steel capacity, which emit a lot of air pollutants, as well as carbon dioxide, were eliminated. And we also have trying to eliminate the high emitters of vehicles. So these measures reduced over 500 million tons of coal combustion, and reduced over 11 million tons of sulfur dioxide and 5 million tons of NOx, and reduced more than 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions. So I think those are the some experience that other developing countries may learn from our experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, reducing coal use from those coal-fired burners is a critical challenge still in many countries. And yes, I visited Beijing a few years ago for the Belt and Road Summit, and I was amazed to see that there are that all the light vehicles in Beijing are all electric. Everywhere, I think, or at least in 100 cities. Can you say a bit more about that, the wholesale conversion to electric vehicles of all the light vehicles in Chinese cities?
Yes. Beijing is only one example promoting electric vehicles. There are many other cities like Shenzhen, like Shanghai. They are all promoting not only electric personal cars, but also the electric buses and the new energy like heavy-duty vehicles. And for Beijing, that in the last 20 years, we have been promoting the new energy vehicles, and now we have a very ambitious target for the next 5 years to increase the number of the electric vehicles to about 2 million. From now it's less than 0.7 million. And so the almost all the new cell vehicles are the electric vehicles. And in addition to that, most of the buses and some of the trucks have been replaced.
Interesting, indeed a good example. Now, if those are the successes, could you say finally last words on what you consider to be the key challenges that remain for China and similar countries?
Yes, I would say that first, the replacing coal is still the largest challenge and the key areas for China to better tackle air pollution and climate change. For example, power sector is the largest carbon dioxide emitter. However, its air pollutant emissions has been significantly reduced. So we need to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions from power sector, but at the same time, it doesn't help a lot to air quality. But for other end of use of coal, like households, like other industries, there's still large potential. But to replace, considering more than 3.9 billion tons of coal in one country, that's, I would say, the largest challenge. And secondly, I would say that although air quality and climate policies can provide mutual benefits, there may be disharmony between air pollution control and climate reduction policies. For example, reducing one pollutant, such as SO2, may lead to additional atmospheric warming rather than cooling. So that's why I said more efforts are needed to identify policies that really provide win-win solutions for air pollution and the climate. Last but not least, I would say that along with the rapid economic development, China has also experienced the fastest urbanization process. So in future, maybe 300 million rural residents are expected to move to the urban area by 2050. So the increase of urban population would put pressure on the land use, on transportation, infrastructure, and that increase carbon emissions and air pollution. So such development of the low carbon cities would be one of the key areas for China to better tackle the two issues together. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Wang. I thought that was very instructive and very enlightening for us. Thank you for your examples in both win-win successes and further challenges that I think we could summarize as powering past coal, some of that would say, which I think is not only for China, but many countries in Asia, a key challenge. So can we thank you for your contribution and then move on to Mr. Kim, the Managing Director of the Solution for Our Climate organization, and ask you a question as well. Particularly if we want to power past coal, we'd have to rapidly increase the adoption of renewable energy. What do you think is impeding the growth of renewable energy adoption in East Asia the most?
I believe it's mainly two factors. Number one, renewable power plants have difficulties being sited and permitted. Sorry. I believe it's there. We have two issues mainly. Number one is the physical permitting issue, and number two, most East Asian countries and even Southeast Asian countries have a market structure issue. I'll go with the market structure issue first. Coal power plants are owned by companies that can permit access to electricity networks. So if the national company that owns the electricity network permits more renewables, makes the grid environment more flexible, it will lose money. Of course, there's a tendency to be very rigid, to not allow more renewable, make the grid more flexible for mainly these vertically owned, vertically integrated, bundled national utilities. And I think this is a big problem. This is not just a problem of Korea, but also a problem of Indonesia, Vietnam, Japan, China. And as the seriousness of the issue of climate becomes more important, I think the world will have to address this issue. In order to permit more renewables and reduce fossil fuel generation, we have to make nationally owned utilities permit more, allow more renewables, more innovative energy sources into the grid. We also have a physical permitting issue. What's happening in Korea is that we have 200 sets of solar power plant permitting schemes. Each have different distancing requirements. It makes it very unpredictable for developers to develop renewable power plants. Same thing happens in offshore wind, same thing happens in onshore wind. There has to be a level of preemption in permitting renewable power plants. And I think that's the way that our government, our president, can show climate leadership. It's not about enhancing the NDC, not about showing climate, going to carbon neutrality. I think the really specific way to show climate leadership is to look into what's happening on the ground, preempt and organize the disorganized physical permitting systems, not just in solar, but also in offshore and onshore wind as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Indeed, particularly those newly built coal-fired power plants threaten to be frozen assets or become a problem for the owners, right? And therefore, the future for the fossil fuel industry is, I think, highly uncertain. What do you think is the future? What can the fossil fuel industry expect?
Okay. Remembering how the world responded when COVID-19 happened, everything was very urgent, and costs and losses in business was a relatively small issue. With climate, with our calendar on climate shortening, I think the same thing will happen. And those exposed to fossil fuels, those who, if we have a trajectory from now to zero in 2050, the assets that are above that trajectory will all become stranded. And those are the industries that are most exposed to fossil fuels. I think in Korea, those would be the industries that rely on building fossil fuel-related facilities. Fossil fuel power plants, coal power plants has already, the coal power plant manufacturing industry has already experienced a very serious downturn. I think when the world starts to looking into oil and gas, it's going to be our shipbuilding industry, which is mainly about drill ships, which is mainly about LNG carriers. This industry will die, and that's a very big part of our economy, and we have to be prepared, or else our economy will not land softly.
So it was interesting to hear Professor Wang speak about these win-win policies that clearly have had some impact in China, and that she was recommending for developing countries like China and India. Do you think that would be the same for Korea? Korea is, of course, a more developed economy. Would that also hold for Korea?
Well, I think the same thing actually happened in Korea already. Just 10 years ago, people actually didn't know that coal power plants contributed that much to air pollution. Back then, number 1 to number 5 of our major air pollutant sources would have been coal power plants. Now it's not. Now it's not. I would say about 5 years ago, people started to realize the number of premature deaths associated with coal power plants, and that was an eye-opener to our society. And with that, and a lot of visible air pollution in the air, coal power plants become a very easy policy target. So there were a lot of policies that introduced that were intended to reduce air pollutants from coal power, which made coal power plants more uneconomic, and it was very easy. It became much more politically acceptable to close coal power plants earlier. So a lot of our coal power plant closing policies came from not climate policies, but air pollution policies.
Thank you. Yes, this is, I think, fascinating, right? Maybe we can turn also to our final panelist, Ms. Kim, to, in a way, continue the same discussion, because we've already heard that coal is the biggest challenge in Asia to overcome, and that indeed building more coal-fired power plants really puts a burden on future generations. But countries in East Asia, particularly China, Japan, and Korea, have been funding a lot of coal-fired power plants, fossil fuel projects throughout Asia. Now, we have heard recently from the President Moon, that Korea intends to stop that financing. China has also signed up to the P4G declaration that makes that commitment. How do you assess those pledges, and how do you think of this problem from your perspective as a youth leader?
Of course, that kind of what you just said was reflected in the Seoul Declaration, and I believe that inclusion of such wording in the declaration is encouraging, but I believe that this is such a kind of the latecomer strategy, because the leaders need to announce the stop using of coal entirely, not just coal power plants. Because if you see the financial investors, they decided from 3 or 4 years ago, decided not to make more investment into coal power plants. And BlackRock in 2020 made a statement that they will stop investment into coal power plant, and industry with the investment over 50% of coal plant power plant will not be invested, they said. So I believe that that kind of investment or that kind of direction was already there, but the declaration just reconfirmed it. But P4G has been prepared like for a year, and if you had one more year for preparation, I think more had to be included in the declaration, not just about the coal power plants. What I want to say is that you stop investing in coal power plants, and LNG is selected as a kind of bridging technology or fuel. But LNG also comes from the same source. So LNG is relatively produce less carbon or pollutant, but still, from my perspective, it is nothing more than just avoiding the coal plants on the surface level too, on the surface level. And IAEA announced in May about their plan to achieve the carbon neutrality. And if you see this report, all the LNG plants, oil core plants under construction need to be all removed. And without those plants, we can achieve the carbon neutrality. That kind of clear signal has came from multiple international organizations, by scientists or by environmental activists. They all said that it is not just a problem of coal. All the fossil fuels should be stopped, extracted. They should be kept underground, they said exactly. So if you Google the news, you will understand that Korea, Japan, China all emphasize the importance of carbon neutrality in net zero. But still, at the same time, if you see the situation in Asia, China, Japan, Korea, not really raise the fund, but they have existing project going on, which invest in fossil fuel energy. So I believe that 80% of the new fossil fuel plants constructed will be done in Korea, Japan, China, in Vietnam. 80% of the total new fossil fuel plants will be made within those regions. Actually, this region is most vulnerable to climate change, so I think we're digging our own grave like this. So there are so many evidence that we should stop doing that, but we are not taking action on it, so this is quite regrettable. So I expected more ambitious plan at P4G, and it was regrettable not to see it. And I believe that if you go more ambitiously with this plan, I believe that Korea, in that sense, can take initiative, but that was not reflected on the P4G summit. I believe that is regrettable.
Well, the P4G summit was one of many milestones in this year. There will be others, and indeed, President Moon did not make some commitments to a strong NDC at the P4G summit, but he did announce that there would be a stronger target later this year. And yes, you're indicating some countries consider LNG to be a temporary solution, a bridge away from coal, but it's questionable if that will bring us to carbon neutrality in time. There is a lot of discussion here in Korea, certainly on renewable energy adoption. There's a lot of excitement also on green hydrogen. Are you more positive on green hydrogen and its potential?
Actually, this year, NDC will be submitted within this year. And Korea recently established Carbon Neutrality Commission, but I believe that there are 4 proposals made by Commission, but only third proposal is good for the carbon neutrality. So we have submitted a scenario that will achieve the carbon neutrality by 2040, and I was part of this design of the proposal, and that will be reflected in the future carbon policies, and it will cause a trickle-down effect all the down to corporation companies and individuals. But still, we need to see actual actions from the corporation to see some glimpse of hope, because there are so many younger generation have no hope for the future, and that is reflected in the low fertility rate. And one of the biggest threat or one of the reasons for their hopelessness is the climate change, because this is such a silent killer. It will cause brain death out of sudden, so they have huge fear. So nation always said that you need to have more babies to keep the economy, and I'll give this money if you have a baby. But we don't want a baby, not just because of the skyrocketing housing prices, but because of the climate change and inaction of many stakeholders. So COP will be held in 2 years, and all the countries around will be once again gathered at there to see how much progress they made from the Paris Agreement, and that actual implementation or action should be seen to have some glimpse of hope for the youth.
Thank you. And indeed, that decision from Korea on the next NDC is still pending. We know from IPCC and from countries already made aggressive commitments that to be in line with net zero 2050, the NDCs should really be between 45 to 50%, but that is of course very challenging. I'm hopeful that that is the direction that Korea will go to, and it's, I think, a very active debate. Can I ask you, as the last contribution to this panel, to tell us what young people are doing? What actions are young people taking, and how can they help increase awareness of the whole population of this urgent issue?
저희가 지금 하고 있는 활동 중에 최근에
There were many, but one example is that young people gathered against the coal power plants. Maybe I think it was June, the Korean government announced Korean version of New Deal plan. And in December, carbon neutrality announcement was made. But between June and December, Korea Power Corporation, or KAMCO, this is nation-owned, state-owned power generator, said that they talked with Vietnam and Indonesia, and they created temporary board of director meeting to create new fossil fuel plants in Vietnam and Indonesia. And actually, we have a coalition with Indonesian youth. So 2 or 3 years ago, we have been talking with them to collect evidence about the casualty caused by coal power plant. And if you calculate the power generation status of that region, the supply is around 98%. So they don't need any more power plant anymore. So they did a feasibility test, and they talked with the local people to see the environmental hazard. But I believe that that kind of new construction is no good for anyone, because Indonesia, right after the announcement of the Green New Deal, saw the new plan of building new power plants. So we talked with the youth in Indonesia and said that we need to raise awareness of this serious issue. So we videotaped the situation on the ground and create a website to raise the awareness of the public, and we will release the interview with the local people next month. So this is called Name and Shame. Doosan Heavy Industries and Korean Exim Bank, Industrial Bank, KAMCO, they need to think this is such a shameful thing for Korea, because the Korean government just announced the carbon neutrality and net zero plan, and general public believe that we are going to the right direction, but behind the scene, they are investing into new fossil fuel plant in developing countries. And they are saying that they have no option but to do so, because that was decided before the announcement of the New Deal plan. But I don't think that is not an excuse, because they believe that they did an investment to earn revenue from this new asset, and they don't want to experience any loss. They just choose to hand over this burden of climate change to the next generation, because I don't want to see any loss. And that kind of decision was by themselves. They don't take responsibility of such a loss. So power coal plants need to operate at least for 30 years once constructed. So by 2050, that kind of responsibility should be bear by us. So I think they are so lack of responsibility because they knew it, they know it, and still approved it. They approved the construction of new fossil fuel plant in Indonesia, and all the responsibilities will be borne by the youth generation in Indonesia and in Korea. because local people will die premature death coming from the pollutants of the fossil fuel plants. And I believe that the carbon budget is not being used by a single country, but that budget should be shared by all the countries around the world. And we are contributing to the loss of carbon budget by making that kind of new investment. I don't think that this does not make sense at all. So that kind of campaign has been done by me.
Thank you. I think it's a good example of youth activism and leadership, or as you call it, name and shame activism. I think this is part of a very active debate in society, and we've had some wonderful examples from our different panel members. And I have to say, I was heartened this morning to learn that major companies like Hyundai, for instance, have committed to net zero by 2045. That will be interesting to see and follow, and I'm sure that youth activists like yourself will make sure that they deliver what they promised to make sure that indeed we get to the future that young people deserve. Clean air, blue skies are definitely a key component of that, and we've heard from Professor Wang that that can go hand in hand with fighting climate change as well. I think that's a very positive message. I'd like to thank our speaker and panelists for this afternoon and hand it back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director General Reese Berman and all the panelists for thought-provoking discussion. The first session talked about interactions between climate change and air pollution in greater depths. Once again, thank you very much. And we will take a short break before we go to the second session. And the second session will be have the topic about how science and technology can support policy and cooperation in addressing air pollution. We will take a short break. Now we will begin the second session of 2021 International Forum on Transboundary Air Pollution, commemorating the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. This session will be under the theme of how science and technology can support policy and cooperation in addressing air pollution. This session will be moderated by Professor Hong Yun-cheol, Professor of Medicine at the Seoul National University. And also we have a very distinguished panel of experts, Anna Inglelit, Chair of the Executive Body to the Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, is joining us online in Sweden. Also here on the venue, we have Professor Park Rok-jin from School of Earth and Environmental Sciences at the Seoul National University, and Senior Researcher Jang Im-seok from Environmental Satellite Center, National Institute of Environmental Research. Please welcome them with a big round of applause.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. I am the moderator of the second session, the Yun-cheol Hong. The theme of this session is science and the policy and cooperation. So with these three keywords, we will have this second session. We had a lot of experience. No policy cannot persuade the people without the scientific evidence and the cooperation. So science, policy, and cooperation, these keywords should go hand in hand. So under this topic, we will start the second session. We have the wonderful three panelists, and each panelist will give a short presentation, and then I will ask a question. The first panelist is Anna Inglelit, the chair of the executive body to the Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution and the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe.
Would you please give us your presentation now?
Thank you very much, moderator. I will first share my screen. And I hope I'm doing that now. Okay, which means that I cannot see you anymore. I hope you can see me. Thank you very much, and good morning and good afternoon, everybody. So I am Anna Inglelit, and I work for the Swedish Environmental Protection Agency. And for the last 2 years, I've had the pleasure of being the chair of the executive body to the UNECE Air Convention. And I was asked to talk a little bit about the importance of science policy interactions in the European region. And I will do so by first going back a little bit in history, because it all started with science. And acid rain was one of the most talked about environmental issues in Europe the last decades of the 20th century. And it became a game changer, both scientifically and policy-wise. And the discovery of the acid rain problem paved the way for policy actions in our region. So when there was observations of fish dying in the Scandinavian lakes and forest dieback on the European continent, this made it to the headlines of the newspapers. And as you see here in the photos, it was not only ecosystems suffering. These pictures are from London in the 50s, where they had big problems with smog. And Europe was facing a very different landscape, industrial landscape at that time. And sulfur dioxide was seen as a local problem that could easily be solved with very high stacks. But from the scientists, we learned that air pollutants travel very long distances before they fall down and cause harm. And this means that we had an international problem to deal with, and this demanded international cooperation between countries. So next slide. In our region today, we have two different policy arenas working very closely together, both when it comes to science and when it comes to policy. And one of them is the UNECE Air Convention, or as is it called, Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution. This convention was signed in 1979, and the other arena we have is the European Union, who started their work on air pollution in the 1980s. And the Air Convention covers more or less the green area you can see here in the picture. We have 51 parties ranging from North America to Europe and the countries east of Europe. And we have 8 different protocols regulating a large number of substances. And the convention has always had a very close cooperation between science and policy. And this has been the motor, and still is the motor, that is driving the convention forward. And this, as I said, scientific network is also used by many other international organizations, including the European Union. From the beginning, we worked very much with the concept of best available technologies, which I'm sure you all know about, but we have come to more and more work with what we call a multi-pollutant and multi-effect approach, which means that in the last of our protocols, we are regulating many different substances, aiming at many different environmental problems and problems on human health. And I hope I was changing slide now. This figure shows the timeline for interaction between science and policy in our region between 1967 and 2018. So concepts like critical loads and integrated assessment were developed and formed links between science and policy. And they were essential for the understanding and the scientific legitimacy of the policy measures. And these concepts also form the basis for priority setting internationally as well as nationally. And it's crucially important to maintain a scientific credibility in all interactions between science and policy. And in our convention, we always have scientists at our meetings.
Oh, now
Yes.
we can see the slide. Okay, that's very good. Please continue. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Oh, you haven't been able to see the slides until now?
Unfortunately, no.
Anna,
But now
Anna.
we can see very clearly. Please continue. Thank you.
And actually, we missed your slides, 2 or 3 slides. So I think it's better to see again your slides. You already passed. So please go back to 2 or 3 slides before, and then
Okay.
please continue.
Can you see it now?
No, actually, we have a technical issues now. So when we see, I will tell you.
Okay. I'm so sorry for this.
Okay, so we now see the first page of your slide.
Okay. Do you want me to do a short version?
Please, I think that if they have some introduction, you can skip over the introduction part and go into your main part, please.
Okay, so I just took some history first, showing that it all started with science, and it was the scientists who taught us how far air pollutants travel. And then I was showing this picture from the 50s and 60s in Europe. And I also showed this slide that I hope you can see now, which basically, if you could hear what I said, this is just to illustrate the 2 different policy arenas that we have in the European region, the UNEC Air Convention and the European Union. And as I said, they work very closely together, both when it comes to science and to policy. And I think this is where I lost you. And can you see this slide now?
So yeah, we can see fish extinction and forest dieback.
Oh, I am not on that slide.
Yeah, I think there is just some time lag now. So would you please go ahead? To policy arena.
Can we deal?
Now we see policy science interaction in Europe, key to success. You can start with this slide.
That is where I left off. And what I said here was that, as you can see here, science and policy has always interacted to move the policy agenda, but also the science agenda forward. And I also said that there are some bridging concepts like critical loads and integrated assessment modeling that has formed these links between science and policy. And what I could also say, I think we are losing a lot of time here, but that an important factor, apart from the scientific credibility that we always have to have in these kind of interactions, is also the building up of networks between scientists and policymakers. This has been utmost important for the advancements in Europe. And this is my last slide. Can you see this?
Yes.
This is the organogram, actually. Thank you. The organogram of the UNECE Air Convention. I'm not going to go through this, obviously, just wanted to let you know that we have a really large scientific network, and the two groups that we are calling Working Group on Effects and EMEP, which is the cooperative program for monitoring and evaluation of air pollutants in Europe. Those are the scientific legs of the convention. The Working Group on Strategies and Review is the policy leg, and these are in constant contact with one another. Last but not least, as we all know, when dealing with air pollutants, we are dealing with an international problem that demands actions on all scales, from the local scale to the national scale to the regional and even global one. Because we have learned quite recently that some pollutants like fine PM and ozone travel very large distances. So we actually share them also between regions. So to that extent, and to increase our cooperation with regions also outside of the UNECE, we have newly created what we call the Forum for International Cooperation on Air Pollution, which is what is marked in yellow here. And the overall aim of this forum is to share and exchange information and knowledge, both on science and policy, with other regions. We have had a few international sessions in Geneva, and I have had the pleasure to meet Korean colleagues there, but also colleagues from Asian, Latin American, African countries. And we hope that you will all join us in this initiative in the future. Thank you very much, and I'm so sorry for the technical problems.
Thank you, Anna. Even though we had some technical difficulties, it's great to hear you about the history you shared with us and your suggestion or proposal for the International Forum. So that is great. I will give you a couple of questions and comments. First of all, you have a really great experience about the long journey to have a convention in Europe. So do you think the fight against air pollution in the European region has it been successful so far? Or
thank you. Yes, sorry.
And I think that there must be many challenges about this. So if you pick up the one most important challenge, what would it be?
Okay, thank you for the question. First of all, yes, I think that to some extent the work we have done on air pollution in the European region has been successful since, as I said, it started with acid rain, and the acid rain problem, we have virtually come to a solution in the European region. We see very, very little soil acidification now. It's halted in most parts of Europe, and we actually see ecosystem recovery. And I would say that sulfur emissions have been down by about 80% since it peaked in 1990. Also, nitrogen oxides have been down quite a bit, about 50%. So this has been successful. However, as you say, we always have new challenges. And today, I think that one of the biggest challenges is actually the effect on human health that we see in European cities. And we see that the WHO guideline levels, for example, for fine particulate matter and ozone, is being passed in many, many European cities. So that is one of the challenges. And if I may mention another one, I also think that the nitrogen deposition is still exceeding harmful levels for ecosystems in many parts in Europe.
Thank you very much. Your biggest challenge is also our biggest challenge too. So the health is really a central issue for us to deal with. And actually, I envy you for your success. The European nation and the UNECE Air Convention are working on a regional basis in Europe, right? So, but we have really the diverse regions in the world. So I think the convention should be expanded to other regions as well. So how can we cooperate more between different regions of the world, particularly Europe and Asia and Africa?
Thank you for that question as well. Yes, it's true, as you say, that we are a regional convention, and there are reasons for that, because many air pollutants, we share them on a regional basis. And I think it would be rather complicated to have a fully global convention where we also negotiate with countries all over the world, because our situations do differ a bit, even if, as you said, we do share the same challenges. However, the Air Convention, we are very keen to cooperate with other areas for mutual learning, for exchange of information, of tools and methods, and sort of take a more global responsibility together for the air that we in the end share. And to that extent, we have created the Forum for International Cooperation on Air Pollution, which is meant to do exactly this. So we hope that we will, together with you, together with other interested parties from all over the world, organize webinars, hold workshops and meetings with subjects of common interest. And we launched this Forum for International Cooperation in December 2019. That was just before this pandemic started. But we hope now that we start to see the light in the tunnel, that we can all come together and join forces in the struggle against air pollution through, for example, this forum.
And our wisdom actually tells us that air pollution does not respect national border, but actually it does not respect regional border too. So as you mentioned, we need to cooperate. And you actually mentioned the very interesting ideas, the Forum for International Cooperation on Air Pollution. I think the audience really want to hear more about this, your suggestion. Would you tell this a little more?
Yeah, as I said, we created this to be a forum for international exchange of information and for mutual learning, because I think that with our 40 years of experience, we can share things with you, but you can also share things with us and how you have been working with air pollution so far. So what we mean is that we should come together and discuss both scientific and technical information, but also to discuss how this work can be organized on a policy level. And the forum is also intended to be a repository for technical information and a convener of countries and organizations with the goal of increased international cooperation. Since we only before the pandemic, as I said, formed this forum, we haven't had the possibility to start up the actions so very much yet. But we have two countries who will lead from our side the forum, and that is Sweden and the United Kingdom. And we would very much welcome, for example, South Korea to join us in taking a leadership role in this forum, if you would be interested.
Okay, thank you very much. I will ask you one more. In the first session, the people talked about climate change, but we also need to talk about the climate change and air pollution together. About the science and about the policy and about the health. So what do you think is the really co-benefit in terms of health when we work with the air pollution and climate change together?
Yeah, I think that it makes sense, of course, to work with these two problems together, because air pollutants and climate gases often stem from the same sources. So what I think is important for health, but also for ecosystem effects, is that when we are designing policies and measures to work to reduce the pollutants, be it greenhouse gases or pollutants or air pollutants, we should always try to have an integrated approach and choose the options that do reduce both air pollutants and climate gases at the same time. We can often do that if we just think about this or have this in mind when we design the policies and measures. But there are also some trade-offs. For example, when we talk about traffic, you can do something which is good for one side and not for the other. And there are various such examples. So I think that the important is to always keep the two areas in mind while you work out your policies and measures.
Okay, and thank you very much for your talk. It was really my pleasure to share, to talk with you and sharing your ideas. 우리 두 번째 그 토론자로
Let
넘어가도록
me invite the second panelist. The second panelist is Lokjin Park, professor from the Seoul National University. He is in the School of Earth and Environment Science. Please. First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting me. I could not read my slide on the screen. Okay, I got it now. Today, I want to talk about the role of science. Air pollution we are talking about today is a global environmental issue, but still it includes scientific issues which were not solved yet. So the role of the science and scientists is to solve these unsolved problems. However, in this session, I don't want to go too much details. So I'd like to talk about more general and the principle, the purpose of the science and why scientists are doing science. And I also want to introduce you the concept of network to show you how important the role of the scientists are. So as you know, the purpose of science is to understand the natural phenomena better surrounding us. And also, we want to predict the future using the scientific evidence. That is called the science and natural science. Scientists use the model to represent the phenomena or the object of their study. So they formulate a hypothesis, and to prove this, they conduct experiments with these models. So, for example, these models can be a mouse, guinea pig, or the Canaroboditis elegans or fruit fly in the lab for biologies. And so scientists analyze the genetic information and make artificial mutation to understand these phenomena scientifically. However, the environmental issue in this forum threatening our lives, such as transboundary air pollution or the climate changes, are global issues. And the Earth is not an object of experiment. Greek scientist Archimedes said, "If you give me a lever and a place to stand, I can move the world." And French scientist Bruno Latour changed the quotation a little bit, saying, "If you give me a laboratory, I can move the world." So, as the scientist of the earth science, I can say that too. However, those two quotations can be translated as, "It is not easy to study pan-global phenomena." However, in modern science, we have more levers or laboratories to solve the environmental issues. For example, in the Northeast Asia, in 2016, Korea and the US had a joint air quality campaign called the COROS-AQ. And also, in 2020, February, the world's first geostationary environmental monitoring satellites were shot to the Earth orbit. So these are the levers to move the world, and these are the laboratories to move the world. And this kind of a research using these tools are called creation of a network, according to the scientist of the science history, Sung-Wook Hong in the Seoul National University. And the role of scientists is to plan this network and create and expand this network. And this network can include not only scientists or the equipment, labs, but also colleagues, governmental officials of the policymaking, and the public citizens who share the result of the science, or the entrepreneurs, or all the politicians. So these networks are moving continuously and expanding its scale to contribute to the development of science. In order to expand this network, the transfer of the knowledge found through the network should be easy. So for that, knowledge should be printed in books or the thesis as the easy transportation media, and the object of study and analytical methods should be standardized to scale it up. And lastly, the scientists should not stay only in the lab. They have to actively expand the network. So the role of scientists are very important because the tool to design and scale up the network, in other words, leverage or the laboratories to move the world, only can be utilized by scientists. So that's why the role of the scientists are very important. So I'd like to summarize by applying the scientific network into the concept of the transboundary air pollution issue. So in terms of the development of tools to solve problems and design of network to utilize the tools, I think Korea did a great job because, as I told you before, we had the air pollution, air quality campaign, and we also had a geostationary satellites for the environmental monitoring. So these can work as the leverages. So Korea did a good job to paving the road for that. And secondly, for the creation of the network and the establishment of the standards, we need to have the joint standards to have a research on the air pollution in the Northeast Asia through the joint research and joint cooperation plan. And lastly, for the scaled up the network, we need to have a more like a printed results, such as the scientific theses and papers and articles about the air pollution. And by doing so, we can have a raise awareness among the publics about the air pollution and climate change. So transboundary air pollution was approached in terms of the politics and the diplomatics. However, this was true not only in Korea but also in other countries. So I believe leading and the active role of scientists who holds an important key in designing and training, expanding the network is all the more required to solve pan-global environmental issues of climate change and transboundary air pollution. Thank you, Professor Park. You talked about the roles of science and the scientists, and you also introduced the concept of the network and expansion of the network to solve the problem of transboundary air pollution. And you said the roles of scientists are very important in that. Actually, science is very important. If the policy is not based on the scientific evidence, it is not effective at all. The public is interested in the scientific evidence. So I'd like to ask a question about that. So the publics are interested in the concentration of the PM 2.5, whether it's increasing or decreasing, especially in the Northeast Asia. What's the trend? Thank you for your question. As scientist who is studying the PM 2.5, I got this question most often. And I also have a lot of opposition from my answer. So whenever I receive this kind of question, I think the expansion of network is not working properly. So the Ministry of Environment, according to the Ministry of Environment, PM 2.5 has been monitored for more than 20 years. So from the long scales, the PM 2.5 is decreasing from the long term of the perspective. However, the public says that's not true because they perceive that they could not see the blue skies anymore, and they are so sure that the PM 2.5 is increasing, and they don't trust the scientific evidence or the results. However, according to the statistics, the PM 2.5 is decreasing. So maybe it is lack of the communications, and maybe there are some misunderstanding. And as a scientist, we have to solve those kind of miscommunication, I think. Thank you for your answer. So many publics are interested in the scientific results, and this should be answered by the scientists, I think. Transboundary movement of the transboundary air pollution is highly interested by the public. So, in easy terms, air pollution in Korea is coming from China. So that's the question many Koreans are asking. This is very highly influencing on Korea. However, it is also the issue we have to think about for our country. So yes, I received those questions a lot too. In 2010, we had a Chorus AQ campaign, and we had the statistical result. And China is in the windward direction, and China gives a lot of the air pollutant, according to the statistic. But problem is that the pollutants from China, what kind of influence were given to Korea? I can talk about these generally or specifically. The pollutant from China gives an impact in Korea, but it depends on the seasons or the situation. So this pollutant should be moved by the wind. However, the wind direction is always different. It's changing. So the high concentrated the fine dust is coming from China for sure. However, but we have many cases which is not. Especially during this week, the air was so clear, and we could see a blue high sky. But in the summer season, we can see the blue sky because the oceans brings a clean air to the Korean peninsula. So the transboundary air pollution issue cannot be defined with just one word, such as China is giving the impact to Korea. So for example, in the past, maybe we can see how much impact China gave to Korea, but we cannot relate it everything to China. So for a long time, we have to have a study, and we have to find an answer. And through those kind of long-term study, we have to find out how much we had an improvement, and we have to conclude a solution based on that. Thank you very much. So the Korea, China, and Japan has the governmental cooperation, but the network of the scientists among those countries are highly required, I think. One more question goes to you, too. So usually we say that we have a high PM 2.5 and that we have a fine dust. So the average level. So sometimes we have a very highly concentrated PM 2.5 of more than 100. So sudden high concentration fine dust, why does it happen? Concentration of the fine dust in the air is affected by how much we emit. And secondly, how fastly it distributes. So those two aspects are most important in the concentration of the fine dust in the air. However, the average level is affected by the emission. So for the last 20 years, the concentration of the PM 2.5 was decreasing continuously because the emission decreased in Korea. However, episodic high concentration is happening sometimes, and this is related to the diffusion in the air. So even though we emit small, if it's stagnant and if it accumulates, it becomes a high concentration. So in the first session, we talked about the climate change, and this is also related to the climate change. We emit the less pollutants, but if it's stagnant, if it doesn't move and it stay there, the concentration is going up, and we call it the climate penalty, because we emit less, but due to the stagnant air, it piles up. So high concentration day shows the zero wind speed. So it is a the local climate phenomenon affects a lot. Thank you for your clear explanation. So we talked about the concentration of the fine dust and other impacts, but the public wants the answer how you will solve this problem. So what will be the technology which can contribute to solving this problem? Sorry, I'm taking too much time here, but briefly speaking, we know that pollutants, where pollutants coming, then we have to stop this pollutant coming out. For example, those kind of technology is required, and we need filters and effective like a filtration of the emit pollutant is important. But the severity of the air pollution comes from lack of understanding of the source, emitting source. So we have to find out. We need a technology to figure out where these pollutants coming out and what's the mechanism of these emittent. So this kind of monitoring and observing technology is highly required to solve this problem. Thank you, Professor Vok, for your great presentation and answers.
패널리스트를 모시도록 하겠습니다. 세 번째 패널리스트는 장임석 국립환경과학원 환경위성센터의 환경연구관이십니다. 부탁드립니다.
네, 오늘 초대해 주셔서 감사합니다. 저는
Thank you so much for your kind invitation. Like you said, the first thing I want to say is that if you cannot measure, you cannot manage. It means that if you can measure, you can manage. So far, all the measurement technologies we had so far has made a progress for the last 20 years. So let me brief on it. And new technologies have been implemented, and let me share the information about new technologies as well. Air pollutants, including fine dust, changes by time and space. So you need to have the kind of temporal and spatial information. If you see the space, it travels up to 1,000 kilometers, and also the situation of it changes for more than 24 hours. So that kind of monitoring and observation technology are critical, and thanks to the launch of the satellite, we were able to make huge progress in monitoring effort. And we didn't have such capability at the beginning. In the past, if you see this kind of space or time-related information, we were able to cover only 100-kilometer radius, and we were able to measure once a day, month. So it was not a monitoring, but just the data for analysis. But last year, Korea launched a new environmentally monitoring satellite, and it is capable of capable of upgrading the resolution up to 8 kilometer and can capture the situation once an hour. So it is more close to monitoring. So that kind of resolution, temporal resolution and spatial resolution are all can be seen in this slide. So with this infrared light, you can take the picture of one place twice a day or up to 8 times a day. So you understand the spatial changes. It means that you can understand the traveling of air pollutants and how they are changing depending on the weather situation. If you see the slide, you can understand the major factors of artificial pollutants. If you see the change in time and space, it first starts from metropolitan cities and spread all the way to the vicinity of the metropolitan city. Since they stay very short in the air, instead of traveling across the nations, it just affects the nearby nations. So by doing so, you can understand how those pollutants spread in the air. Another new technology is this. Recently, PM2.5 or fine dust, ultrafine dust is very critical. So we have a new technology we can control and monitor the ultrafine dust because it is very critical for the general public and the government to respond to the health crisis in real time by letting people know the concentration of ultrafine dust in real time so that people can better respond to it. So in 2007 we installed 2 controlling sites and we have now 10 environmental pollutant concentration monitoring center across the nation. And with the information coming from center, you can understand the level of concentration and types of pollutants. And sometimes the government issue an alert to reduce to improve the air quality in the short period of time. And I told you that satellite is capable of monitoring space and time changes. And this means that the satellite can be utilized for other purposes as well. Especially pollutants, like said, sometimes travel across the nations, and that kind of traveling can be well captured with the power of the satellite. This is one example. Pollutants, including the ultrafine dust PM2.5, comes from outside of Korea, go into the peninsula, and then move out from the Korean peninsula. If you combine the meteorological data with the satellite data, you can understand the amount of inflow. This is not just assumption, but exact calculation based on the data coming from satellite. So if you have that kind of information, you can understand how much is attributable to the outsource pollutant or the pollutant within the nation. And by doing so, you can enjoy the scientific evidence that can be a basis for the future policies. Also, general citizens are really interested in the actual concentration of ultrafine dust within the region they live in. The kind of satellite information can also monitor the pollutant up on the mountain or in the sea, so you can see the concentration across the nation, around the nation, in entirety. So the air you breathe in, the level of the air you breathe in can be measured, and at the same time, the total amount of the pollutants can be measured as well. And by measuring the total amount of the pollutant in the air, you can understand how much pollutant will be fall down onto the ground. Because those were something you breathe in with a high accuracy. If you see the picture on the right side, we use the AI algorithm to calculate the amount of the pollutants coming down onto the ground from the air with a high accuracy. So with that information, you can understand the concentration of the places where it is very difficult to install the monitoring center, like up on the mountain or near the sea. And that kind of additional information will be very powerful, especially in Asia. We have very few the monitoring centers on the ground, so that kind of additional information can be a complementary information for us. Actually, installing a physical monitoring center costs a lot and requires a huge manpower, but that kind of satellite information does not require such high cost or manpower. So, Asian region can share the information coming from the satellite, and that's why the Ministry of Foreign Affairs last year initiated a project to share the information, environmental satellite information. So by sharing this kind of information, we can create a synergy effect, I think. Also, this environmental satellite has one caveat, because validation and calibration must be done to produce precise data, and that kind of network should be forced for validation and calibration for the data of high accuracy. And that kind of initiative has been proposed by the ministry. If it goes successful, we'll be able to share the information in real time with the countries around this Asian region. And by doing so, we'll be able to create a good infrastructure and share it with the countries with a weak infrastructure. So that kind of initiative or programs must be further expanded, because we are kind of the front runner in this field, so we need to share this asset so that we can enjoy the benefit of it together. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. So satellites and using the utilization of the AI, the data should be improved qualitatively, I think. So the evidence-based policy can be made thanks to all your work, I think. So the national, international cooperation can use this kind of the data.
Actually, scientists all believe that air pollutants can travel across up to 1,000 kilometers, and that is common understanding of scholars. And if that is the truth, environmental problem can be a diplomatic problem as well, so it is quite a complicated problem. But the language of science is all about the evidence of the scientific founding, so we can have a common ground of understanding about this air pollution. So data sharing and enhancement of understanding about the scientific background of the air pollution can be used as a reference material for diplomatic negotiation as well, so that people can do the discussion based on actual fact. And by doing so, they'll be able to, of course, they need to take the economic and social aspect into consideration, but still they can have a common ground of understanding in terms of environmental pollution. And if that is the case, they can make a collective effort. So that is the role of the scientific data, I believe. Especially, that is the truth for satellite data, because the satellite sensor uses a single data that measure the pollutants of the multiple nations. So the difference in methodology or management does not happen because the satellite has only one single sensor. So that is another benefit of using the satellite data, I believe.
So objective and the high quality data can be used to expand the network of the science, which was mentioned by the Professor Park. And with this network, I hope we can have a solution for the transboundary air pollution. And we talked about the satellite data and the other data too. So the general public can access to this scientific satellite data and utilize them.
이런 위성 자료를 이제
Actually, satellite data
이 연구에만 활용되는
not only used for policy design and the research, and general public can also access to it
볼 수가 있고
on official website, and they can use it for various purposes. For example, you can use information coming from the US. So by using the kind of satellite information, you can understand the situation within your region or nearby cities or countries. For example, the concentration of fine dust. And those kind of information are given in real time.
어떤 이 정보들을
So with that information, you can manage your personal health or plan personally to your own benefit.
뭔가 이제
It means that
대응할 수 있는
individual people will have greater capability of responding to it at the individual level.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. We had the insightful panelists, and we had a good conversation. So I hope the objective and scientific evidence can expand the network of the scientists and the cooperation with the policymakers to solve the problem of the transboundary air pollution. And also, as Anna Engelid said, we have a successful model in the European countries, in the Europe, so maybe we can learn a lesson from it, and we can share the cooperation with Asian countries and the African countries and the European countries. Maybe we can make the network together. And the Forum for the International Cooperation on Air Pollution should be a very good model for that. So I'm hoping that we can have some opportunity later. I'd like to conclude the second session. Thanking you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Hong, and all the panelists for the insightful discussion. Through the session, we were able to talk about how science and technology can support policy and cooperation in addressing air pollution. Please give them another big hand. Thank you very much, all the moderator and panelists. And we will take a short break, and after the break, we will continue with the third session with the topic of regional cooperation on air pollution in Northeast Asia. Please come back at 4:45. Thank you. Now we will begin the last session of 2021 International Forum on Transboundary Air Pollution, commemorating the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. The topic of this session is Regional Cooperation on Air Pollution in Northeast Asia. For this session, Mr. Nam Sang-min, Deputy Head of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, East and Northeast Asia Office, will be our moderator. And it is my great honor to introduce you our well-known panelists. We have Mr. Chun Kwon-ho, Senior Researcher of Global Environment Research Division of the National Institute of Environmental Research. Also, we are joined by Chief Senior Researcher Shimizu Atsushi of Asian Atmospheric National Institute for Environmental Studies in Japan. Last but not the least, we have Officer Munkubat Chediku of Air Pollution and Ozone of the Ministry of Environment and Tourism of Mongolia. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome them with a big round of applause.
안녕하십니까. UNS갑 남상민입니다. 지금 저희 동북아 대기 협력 세션 마지막 세션인데요. 지금 참석하고 계신 분들, 특히 온라인으로 지금 시청하고 계신 분들께 감사드립니다. 이번 세션은
For your participation. This session is going to talk about the situation in and outside of Korea, and please allow me to moderate in English because we have overseas guests.
Thank you for joining this session on air pollution cooperation in Northeast Asia. Those two previous sessions already covered the key elements that related to regional and bilateral cooperation. But I'm really excited to have three great panelists who are directly involved in multilateral or regional or bilateral cooperation. So without further ado, let me first invite Dr. Chun Kwon-ho, Senior Researcher from National Institute of Environmental Research of the Republic of Korea for his presentation.
네, 감사합니다. 저는 지금 소개시켜드릴 얘기는 한국과 중국이 2014년부터 추진하고 있는 대기질 공동 연구와 그 외에 또 저희 과학원에서 추진하고 있는 국제 협력과 관련된 자료들을 소개해 드리도록 하겠습니다. 한국과 중국은 2013년 두 나라 모두 대기질이 급격히 악화되는 겨울을 맞이하게 됐습니다.
Air pollution, air quality in 2013. So both countries recognize the severity of the problem. So based on that, in early 2014, head of both countries called for the practical actions to improve the air quality, knowing that the two countries are at the center in the northeast countries. So during the bilateral summit, they signed the MOU of the Korea-China joint research to improve the air quality and the trace emission sources. So among three projects signed in the MOU, one of them was the Korea-China research on ambient air quality. The first one was the monitoring, and we also had the exchange of the human resources. And based on that, in 2015, Korea, NIER, and China, CRAES, were designated as responsible research institutions. And for the first time, we set up the laboratories in the Beijing for the joint research. Now, due to the COVID pandemic, we cannot visit the Beijing office, Beijing laboratories. It is closed. But I was the chair of the joint research group for 2 years, and now NIER and the other 4 researchers are waiting for joining in the Chinese lab after this pandemic. So what's the status of the Korea-China joint research? Before going into the main explanation, let me tell you one thing. We had a question about China and Korea. What kind of the transboundary air pollution issue do we have, or what's the reason? Many people are questioning about that, but our joint research is not about that. The transboundary air pollution exists between Korea and China, and that's true scientifically and ethically. However, the biggest problem in solving this problem is that we should not blame certain countries for that. In 2014, scientists got together. We concluded if the air quality improves in China, the air quality in Korea will improve too. So in that big principle, we try to know the cause of the air pollution in China, and we try to do the research about it. That's how we started this joint study. Now, 4 cities in China and 4 cities in Korea, total 8 cities, has an online monitoring for the fine dust. And we are continuously monitoring the concentration. In the beginning, we just had one in Beijing, but we installed the monitoring equipment in Baoding, and we increased one by one until last year. We have 8 sampling points for monitoring the ambient air quality. We are getting this sampling because to know what kind of characteristic of pollutants in each country have, and what kind of cause we have to prevent to solve this problem. So as a part of those kind of effort, we installed these sampling points. So we got a lot of data from these sampling points, and one of that was that you are watching on the slides now. So Beijing has a higher concentration than Seoul, on average. Seoul and Beijing has the characteristic of the metropolitan city. Based on the result of the fine dust, Seoul and Beijing has the highest concentration of ammonia, nitrate. But in the Baoding is like Ilsan in Korea, so it's a new developed city, and it shows those kind of characters. Baoding is not far from the Beijing, and the Beijing has a lot of facilities. The facility in the Beijing relocate to the Baoding in the newly development area. In Korea, that happened too. Once we had a newspaper article in 2014 saying that the factories from the West Coast is coming to Korea from China. However, that is not true because all the facilities which was in the Beijing moved to the Baoding. So we find the many ammonite, nitrogen, and also ammonium sulfate, and which is the characteristic of the newly developed cities. China is a big country, so the air pollution in China is a very important issue. So these pollutants should be analyzed to show the impact to other countries. So when the high concentration of fine dust happens in Beijing, the pollutants was mostly inside of the Chinese continent, and the matter inside the land of the China was the cause of the fine dust. So that means that China should set up the policy direction so that they can remove those kind of the matters inside the land. Second slide is very interesting. Chinese government in 2013, from 2013, set up the 5-year plan, and also from 2018, they also have a 3-year plan to make the blue sky. When they pursue these policies, we modeled the result of those kind of policies, whether it was effective or not. You can see the blue colors here. That doesn't mean that the concentration decreased, and this is the prediction. So average concentration can decrease by 18% if these policies continues. That means that the policy, Chinese policy, is working properly. Other than that, the Korea Ministry of Environment had the joint research with China. We called this project the Transboundary Air Pollution Research. However, we are calling it as the collaborative research program for the better air quality over Northeast Asia, involving Korea, China, and Japan together. So the next presenter is also involved in this program. So for the long time, we had the Transboundary research program, including the geostationary satellites and the other projects. So we have so many collected data, and we are sharing our experience and lessons with other countries in Northeast Asia. So this is the international training program we are doing with other countries, and the presenter, the panelists from the Mongolia, also joined these cooperation program with Korea, and we are expanding this kind of international cooperation continuously.
Thank you, Mr. Chun. I have two questions actually. Korea, China, and Japan has worked together for a short period of time but produced good result. For example, you expanded the area of monitoring 8 locations so far, and you accumulated data coming from that 8 location. Also, you analyzed the component of air pollutants, and the components vary in Seoul and Beijing. Sulfur or ammonium, but actually sulfur and ammonium comes out like the same. So maybe based on such information, you can produce some recommendation and cooperation programs for Beijing and Seoul. So have you proposed that? That is first question. And the second question is that at the end of your presentation, you talked about the civil organization-led joint research. But before that joint research, LTP, Long Range Transboundary Program, was done, and it was kind of national level research program. But now you're doing private level program. So I think you are kind of downscaling the program to some degree, because in the previous session, one speaker said that the scientific research should be basis for the nation-to-nation cooperation. So you are kind of going backward from that perspective. So what do you think about that? Do you think that it can be a chance to make further progress?
You pointed out very important aspect. From 2013, I've been working on this research. Like from the signing of the MOU, I'm leading the research so far. We believe that China is the biggest polluting country, and many people are interested in the reduction of the pollutant in China. However, in the beginning, the Chinese government didn't work that hard, but now, as time passes, the Chinese governments can control with various policies, and those policies are working well. So that means Korea needs to have a diverse approach too. As you told before, the concentration in Beijing is the level of 10 years ago of Korea in terms of the concentration. And one of the biggest problem is the frequency of the high concentration fine dust. It was like twice a week. However, when I come back, it was just the 1 day a month. So the sky is very clear in China. So this kind of situation is changing very quickly. So we cannot blame just China. We have the panelists from Mongolia, but we need the various scientific data from various countries. And as the Professor Park said, we need a network because this is done by people. We have to have a trust in each other. And we made the policy based on that, on the public opinions, based on public opinions. And we need to have the various results from these various policies and the corporations. So far, it was led by government. So that's why the sensitive data could not be released in each countries. Maybe we had some like a passive approach. However, in order to overcome those kind of problems, the private sectors, the scientists in private sectors can do whatever they want. So in order for them to do it, the government opened the platform. So air pollution, air quality, and the climate change research can become the object of cooperation among countries, I think. And maybe the Korean can take a leading role in that, which is very important for us.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Our next speaker will be Dr. Simiza Yatsushi, who is a senior chief senior researcher from National Institute of Environmental Science of Japan. He has been also substantially involved in various research projects in Northeast Asia. Dr. Simiza Yatsushi, floor is yours.
Thank you, moderator. Yeah. Yes, and can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we can see, but there is some. It doesn't really show entire slide of the first page. Oh, now it works.
It works. Okay, thank you. Yeah, as introduced by the moderator, I'm a researcher in National Institute for Environmental Studies, Japan. I think it is very similar organization to the NIER in Korea because the both institute or organization were fundamentally very close relationship with Ministry of Environment in Korea or in Japan. I will show 3 cases of international collaboration in atmospheric monitoring in Northeast Asia region. The first one is the LiDAR network for real-time monitoring of atmospheric particles in the troposphere. So LiDAR is a light detection and ranging system which utilizes the laser beam. This light will emit it into the sky, then some particles in the atmosphere will scatter the light backward. Then the signal is collected at the telescope, and we will capture the vertical distribution of atmospheric particles over there. Currently, we have almost 20 LiDARs in this region, For example, 11 in Japan and 3 in Korea and 3 in Mongolia. And there are 4 LiDARs in China, but unfortunately, the data cannot be transferred in real time because the LiDAR can detect weather conditions, which is very sensitive information in China. So we cannot monitor the result from China, but we can monitor the result in Japan or in Korea, in Mongolia in real time. The picture in right-hand side indicates the result from LiDAR observation. It's very complicated picture, but we can see the time and height region of very high density of atmospheric pollutants, including anthropogenic particles or Asian dust particles. The top 3 panel indicates the observed result, but bottom 2 indicate the processed data result. This panel shows the location of Asian dust particles. For example, this horizontal axis corresponds to the 1 month from the March 1st this year and the April 1st this year. So at the 29th of March this year, we have very big Asian dust particle event for more than 1 day, during 1 day. This is a very big advantage of LiDAR observation because we can distinguish the Asian dust particle which consists of soil particles and another anthropogenic pollutant particles, which is mainly ammonium sulfate or ammonium nitrate or organic carbons. So this network is operated mainly by our institute, but of course collaboration with Korean colleagues, including Seoul National University or UNIST, and also colleagues from Mongolia. And important point is that we will update this kind of picture every hour. So anyone can watch the result in real time on our website here. The next one is a little bit related to the governmental activities, but fundamentally it is a research program. We are attending the collaborative program, and TEM is stand for the Tripartite Environment Ministers Meeting. So China and Japan and Korea will gather the ministers of environmental ministers of environment gather every year and make conference. Under that conference, collaborative research is organized. The target of this research is Asian dust or sand dust storm. So I'm belonging to working group 1, which is designed for monitoring and forecast of Asian dust. So we have modelers from JMA Meteorological Research Institute or Tues University, and from Korea also NIMS Korean scientists is modelers. And from China, the monitoring people is joining, and also Mongolian colleagues are participating to this working group. So in these activities, every year we identify the most important Asian dust event, mainly in the spring season, but sometimes in autumn. And then we will share the observed data at each country. then such data is utilized for model validation. And we will have annual meeting of the working group. Then we can share the result or information related to the Asian dust. And we have another working group. Working group 2 is focusing on the surface conditions. I mean, the soil condition or vegetation condition in the source area of the Asian dust, which means, which will be Gobi Desert or Taklamakan Desert. For example, this year we will have a workshop which is very open for not only for members of the working group, but also for scientists related to the dust and sandstorms in this region. And the final one is already mentioned by previous speaker, but from Japan, our NIS and ACAP are participating, and from Korea, the many scientists is participating, and from China also there are many colleagues. And there are two working groups. The one is for modeling and impact evaluation, and another one is for observation working group. So I'm belonging to this working group. The one important point is that this year we will start the simultaneous observation by same common instrument whose name is Pandora, and which will measure the particle distribution of anthropogenic pollutant. And I think NIER will lead these activities this year. Okay, that's all of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Simic. My first question is here we have this LiDAR network, really monitoring Asian dust or yellow dust.
Yes.
And then you have also this TAM, also especially the working group on monitoring and forecasting. This is also working on yellow dust or Asian dust.
Yes.
So is there, what is the institutional linkage between two mechanisms, or if there is no institutional mechanism, what is any substantive collaboration between two mechanisms?
Yeah, actually the LiDAR network is, research-based monitoring. This is not conducted by government. This is just based on just our effort in NIES. But the result from this LiDAR network is of course provided to the TEM working groups. So if the TEM working groups consider that the LiDAR network is very important, then we can continue more easily. So the output from LiDAR network will help the more continuous observation through the mechanism of TEM or governmental organization.
Thank you. And also we have some questions from audiences. And one question, two are quite similar. And question from Professor Kim Jun, Yonsei University. And his question, earlier session, I'm not sure whether you also attended the previous sessions. We had a presentation from Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution in Europe. So the speaker was highlighting the role of science for supporting, driving intergovernmental or regional cooperation. So the question is, in order to institutionalize or in order to develop intergovernmental cooperation mechanism, what kind of scientific and technical research is required in Northeast Asia? And you already have accumulated experience in this scientific research, collaborative research. So what's your view on the required scientific and technical cooperation in order to build strong intergovernmental cooperation on air pollution?
It's not an easy question for me, but I think the communication between scientists and policymaker is very important in each country. I mean, for example, in Japan, we directly talk with officers in Ministry of Environment in Japan. So if we strengthen the communication between scientists and policymakers, then it will help to make progress of international collaboration, because the policymaker will consider that for example, policy dialogue between countries by themselves, it is their task. But we can assist their ideas or their understanding of current situation using our monitoring data. So at the first step, the communication between the scientists and policymaker in each country will very important. It's my opinion.
So you will point on really the role of a scientist for providing data and information for policymakers to support their dialogue. And so now, I mean, also Dr. John Guono also presented the project, now new project, this CRP BAQ ONE. And what's your expectation? And Dr. John, he highlighted that, the previous LTP project, there was a significant constraint due to this political barrier. But now this academic collaborative program can be free from this political interest. So what's your idea, perspective on the future of this collaborative program?
Yes, I think that LTP was very important for last 1 decade, but currently in Japan, the influence from Chinese continent is very low during last 2 or 3 years. So I think the Ministry of Environment will not have so strong interest on the LTP issues. So it's very severe situation for us as researchers, but I think the academic collaboration will keeping up academic collaboration is important, because in the future, if some new problem occur, then such communication among scientists will be variable. So we have to keep the academic collaborations in this section.
Thank you, Dr. Shimizu, for your informative presentation and also your insightful responses. Let me move on to next speaker. Next speaker is Mr. Munkobat from Ministry of Environment and Tourism of Mongolia. As Dr. John introduced earlier, he is participating while he is a government official of Mongolia. He is currently participating in this training program organized by NIER and also supported by our Northeast Asia Clean Air Partnership. So this program is a part of NIACAP. So floor is yours, Mr. Munkaba.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me, and good afternoon, everybody. And I wanna first wanna happy International Day of Clean Air for blue skies for everyone. And I will try to explain our situation. Maybe everybody knows about Mongolia, but I have to say some brief introduction. Our pollution is more than 3 million, and about half of people living in Ulaanbaatar city. It's very important because last 30 years, our capital city's population is always increasing. And that yellow area is a good area. And more than 50% of households living there and using stove and coal. That's why the source of air pollution in Ulaanbaatar's households are 80% source in Girtain households, in totally more than 200,000 Girs are using coal. And our government approved by resolution about national program for reducing air and environmental pollution. That program's main goal is step by step prohibit the use of raw coal, and other than they're not power plants. It was our short-term goal. And mid-term goal is improve quality and access to public transport and reduce vehicles emissions. And long-term goal is build the mid-term goal is build the capacity of environmental monitoring. And the long-term goal is expand the electricity distribution network and the substations. And next one is give tax exemptions with the advanced and environmentally friendly technology to reduce pollutions. It's our national program's goals. And in last 2 years, we did some activities. What was main activities? At first, all domestic stores other than that standards banned from sales in Ulaanbaatar. It means we could change the old style of stores. And the next one is banning the use of raw coal, beginning from 2019. It was really strong and a very good decision, our government. And now our Minister of Environment and Tourism and Capital City Governor have jointly approving a regulation on renewal of the air quality improvement zone of the capital city every year. This it means that the zones leaving all Girs used the approved the coal, in air quality improvement zone of the capital city. And air quality review for cold season in Ulaanbaatar, we can see last 2 years our PM 2.5 and PM 10 is reducing. And we can see that pictures. We can looking everywhere. Before in 2016, we couldn't see northerly side. Couldn't see some building, something it was difficult. After that decision, we can see everywhere, and PM 2.5 and PM 10 about more than 50% of. Sorry, I was mistake, decreasing. Yeah, yeah, and we could change our air quality index. Before that, index color was red. Now, red to move to red, yellow color. It means a bit, very little pollution. It was our result. Now we have to move to other situation. It means midterm next step is required fuel, gasoline quality in Ulaanbaatar and larger statement as meet the Euro 5 standards. In transport situation in Mongolia now, all our imported vehicles only 4 to 14% of vehicles are new, and about 90% of vehicles are second-hand vehicles. It's one of issue, especially transport sector. And Mongolia imported petroleum products almost 100% from Russia, and import and consumption of Euro 5 standard compliant fuels constituted just 14% of total fuel. Next midterm step is build the capacity of environmental monitoring. Install automatic devices to measure PM 10 and PM 2.5 particles in the air in larger cities in industrial area. Now in UB has just 15 station. They are measuring SO2, NO, NO2, NOx, PM 10, PM 2.5, and ozone. But in other provinces, controlling just 2 pollutants, SO2, NO2. It is not real-time controlling. Next, the long-term step is carry out intensive work to provide gear area reside with the modern apartments, give low and medium income citizens access to long-term low interest loans. It is a long-term goal. After that, our air quality will be good and we can see blue sky. And thank you for attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Munkerbach. So a few years ago, the president of Mongolia declared Ulaanbaatar as a disaster zone. So now, during last couple of years, I see great progress in the reduction of air pollution in UB. 저기 잠깐 maybe 설명을 드리면.
So I need to explain about this a little bit. In case of Nubia of Mongolia, as it was said, 80% of air pollution was coming from residential area. And a huge amount of that comes from ghetto, like the tent region, traditional tent region, ghetto. So in case of Mongolia, there are so many livestock die of cold in the winter, and that comes in several years. And if that cold weather comes, all the people doing livestock come to the cities, and they are living as a marginalized people in society, and they use low quality coal a lot in that poverty area, and they cause many air pollution issues. So if you see the case of Mongolia, climate change, poverty, and urbanization, urban poverty and air pollution happens in an interlinked way. There is a kind of cycle. So in 2019, the Mongolian government released a report about the voluntary SDG, and you can see the details of it in the report. So climate change, poverty, and air pollution are that interlinked in the country. Another thing I need to say is that in 2018, particulate matter decreased by 40%, but it was because of the ban on low-quality coal and improvement of stove. So it means that if the government had a strong will, it can make good improvement in a short period of time. So this is good example of the government will, I think. Also, in case of monitoring Nubia, the station are 15, the location of 15 station. And I think in Mr. Chang's presentation, you also talked about the Pandora, the geostationary monitoring center. There are 2 locations in Mongolia, Pandora location, which monitors the air quality of the region. So that was additional information I need to share with the audience.
So as a next step, you highlighted the need for capacity building for monitoring, also improving the quality of not only coal, but oil and gasoline. And also, though the emission from transport sector in Ulaanbaatar, it is relatively small compared with the emissions from other sectors. But as Mongolia is mostly importing second-hand car, used cars from outside, it is not easy to control or to achieve this Euro 5 standard. So, and in this context, what is your idea, your view on international or intergovernmental collaboration between Mongolia and neighboring countries, whether China or Korea? So what kind of a technical cooperation are you expecting with Korea or other neighboring countries?
Now, we are interested in Korean monitoring system, in Air Korea mode and clean system. Yeah, we need that system because we couldn't implementation air pollution payment law, because we can't controlling any other resource, especially HOBs. We cannot controlling HOBs, heat-only boilers. And that means we need the Korean clean system. Yeah, now we are interested in studying Korea modern clean system. It is very important to us.
Thank you. So 지금 딱 35분입니다.
This is exactly 5:35, and we almost used up our time, so I think we need to conclude this session here. So, like I said, the air pollution issue in this region is serious, and the cooperation has made very slow progress, but nonetheless, recently we saw many good progress done by many good programs among the countries in this region, expanding cooperation scientifically and policy-wise. So we need to make the best use of this kind of cooperative platform so that we can create some kind of convention or create new legal law here. Thank you so much for your kind of listening.
Also, thank you, Dr. Simicha, for your participation and contribution.
Thank you so much for giving us the meaningful session. We had an in-depth discussion about regional cooperation on air pollution in Northeast Asia. We appreciate it. So today we had 3 informative and insightful sessions. Through each of the sessions, we looked for ways to deal with transboundary air pollution. And I believe that each and everyone's effort and wish for blue skies will unite to create a new world. Commemorating the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies is part of our efforts to strengthen cooperation for the restoration of the climate and the environment. Once again, we appreciate all of our moderators and panelists sharing us your thoughtful, provoking opinions. And also, we would like to express our deepest gratitude to all of our guests and participants for staying with us until the very end of the forum. And before we mark the end of the forum, I would like to invite Her Excellency Hyo-eun Kim, Ambassador and Deputy Minister for Climate Change of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Korea, to give us closing remarks. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Professor Kim Jong-wook, Ambassador for Environment, and Professor Emeritus of Seoul National University, distinguished moderators, panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by conveying my deep appreciation to all of you today. We are delighted that you have shared your invaluable information and knowledge. Unfortunately, today we cannot see the blue sky because of rain. However, I'm sure that we have pretty good air quality today. We believe your insights and recommendations today will truly be a great foundation for the further consolidation of policies to effectively address air pollution issues. We believe your wisdom will be a valuable basis for the steps to take moving forward. Air pollution is a significant environmental health risk, not only in Northeast Asia, as emphasized by many, but indeed around the globe. It is a factor in climate change, the water cycle, energy, and food production. Advancing science and data-driven solutions for cleaner air, better health, and a more stable climate is the noble aim of this forum. Accordingly, the case studies and research products presented today are providing to policymakers, journalists, businesses, and environmental advocates valuable insights into what should be done and how to make it happen. Air pollution and climate change are closely interlinked. Indeed, many of you here have placed an emphasis on this. Power produced from fossil fuels, internal combustion engine vehicles, deforestation, wildfire, waste burning. There are many factors which lead to smog and dust that are harmful to our health. They are also contributing to increasing and more frequent manifestations of the climate crisis. As a country both facing air pollution and feeling the effects of climate change, Korea is taking strong measures to improve air quality and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'm sure all of you are well aware that Korea has now become the 14th country in the world to codify net zero by 2050 target in legislation. The Korean National Assembly passed the Framework Act on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth and mandated the government to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 2030 by at least is important word, 35% compared to the 2018 levels. Under this guidance, the Korean government is now working hard to come up with an enhanced NDC to be announced at COP26. Korea's action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions will significantly contribute to bring back blue skies. Clean air for blue skies cannot be achieved through the efforts of one country alone. It requires concerted efforts. That is precisely why we have representatives and experts from a whole range of different countries and organizations today. I would like to take this chance to convey my deep appreciation to the panelists from China, Japan, and Mongolia, and moderators from UNESCAP and the Global Green Growth Institute. Korean researchers and civil society leaders, our thanks go to you also for your excellent work. I believe that today's forum has put in place building blocks. It has paved the way for the sharing of science-based evidence, new technology, enhancing national and regional capacity, and strengthening joint efforts. Strong, action-oriented collaboration in Northeast Asia can spur global efforts for the return of clean air for blue skies. I would like to conclude by saying that I hope this forum will continue to generate valuable momentum for all relevant countries and organizations to move forward in tackling air quality and climate change issues. Whilst the COVID-19 pandemic is the biggest challenge facing the world, we should not allow it to stop our work to improve air quality. This also is so important. It too will help people to enjoy healthier lives. Let's work together to make blue skies a part of your lives way into the future. And thank you for staying with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Now, this brings us to the end of 2021 International Forum on Transboundary Air Pollution, commemorating the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. Once again, we would like to express our deepest gratitude to all of our distinguished guests, speakers, panelists, and both on-site and online participants. We wish you best health and happiness. Thank you.